Well, technically, MMA isn't a martial art. Being mixed martial arts, it's the use and combination of several different ones. The key components to MMA are striking, grappling. You got your wrestling and jiu-jitsu and stuff. So now there are people who it used to kind of be, would a wrestler or a BJJ guy win, or would a Muay Thai fighter beat a boxer, or whatever it was, and now people train in MMA. So even though technically it isn't, it's becoming an art in itself, that it's the sport that someone trains in. So it's losing a little bit of its kind of heritage, where people do a little bit of boxing and a little bit of wrestling, and it's wrestling for MMA and boxing for MMA rather than in its natural form. Which isn't a good or a bad thing, but it means that now I think everyone needs to be a lot more well-rounded, because there are a lot more people out there that are well-rounded. I think I quite like the idea of people coming from a traditional background, but I think that's just me. I don't think there's anything wrong with it if you haven't, but I like the authenticity of it. So in an ideal world, I would love to be a Muay Thai champion and a boxing champion and a kickboxing champion and a wrestling champion, and then go into MMA. But realistically, who has the time for that? My strengths are always going to be in the striking area. You know, I've kickboxed for a lot longer than I've done anything else, and I took to it quite naturally. I don't think, I'm not prepared to say that any art is harder to learn than another one, but if you take Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, it's a game of inches and sometimes millimeters between something working and something not. You can throw a bad punch, but it can still land on someone's face. It might not hurt that much, but you still scored the point. A submission, if you don't have it, you don't have it. So I really wish that, you know, I'd figured out that this is what I wanted to do earlier, so I had a few more years experience. I feel stronger stood up. I feel like I've got, my wrestling is coming on a lot. I think I've got good jiu-jitsu technique. It's just putting it into practice when you're in the cage, because things aren't quite second nature yet, but they're getting better. Most of the time when you tell someone that you do any kind of combat sport, but especially when you mention MMA, and then they realize it's in a cage and the whole ground and pound thing, and someone sits on your chest and punches you repeatedly, a lot of people can't understand the idea that getting punched doesn't hurt that much. Actually, that's wrong. It does hurt. But your recovery of it, because you're used to it, is a lot quicker than it would be if they were in that same situation. So people kind of try and imagine how they would react if that was them, and most of them say, oh, I'd run out the cage. But you wouldn't be in there in the first place. You don't kind of day one punch, day two get in a cage. The ground and pound thing doesn't faze me. That's not where my fear is. My fear is someone kind of grabbing my head and pulling it towards their knee. I don't want to get kneed in the face. I don't want to break my nose. I don't want to ideally compromise the way I look for my sport. I mean, I do. I do it daily, and I've had some horrible injuries, and as long as nothing's permanent, it's amazing what damage you can take in a cage, and adrenaline will get you through.